Hello, welcome back to the Sixties Forum. This is February 24th, the day of the Academy Awards 2008, and I want to start this off with one of the great directors asking a question, pretty pertinent. So let's listen.
Since this program is on film and will probably be shown for many years to come, I should like to address my next remarks to those of you who are watching the show in the year 2000. Please write in at once and tell us what life is like. I'm quite curious.
Alright, sure, Hitch, try to do it. Really, it's been downhill. This was from 1958. When he asked that question, and now it's 2008, 50 years later, and there was a Renaissance period in that time called the 1960s, and things have been going downhill culturally since then. But today I want to focus on a film called Flight of the Phoenix. No, I'm not talking about the worthless remake starring Dennis Quaid that I didn't bother to see. This is the 1965 classic Robert Altman film starring Jimmy Stewart, Richard Attenborough, Hardy Kruger, George Kennedy, and Ian Bannon was the one who was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar. Robert Altman is a director known more for The Dirty Dozen, but this is his masterpiece, in my opinion. It was based on a book by Elliston Trevor from the early 60s. I think it was 62. And it's a novel. He was in the World War II Air Corps, and, he's had a lot of similar stories. So this is about a plane that crashes in the desert in Libya. Benghazi is mentioned. Ernest Borgnine here is the guy who's kind of off his rocker, oil rigger. And he has a radio in this scene. This is after the crash. Jimmy Stewart is trying to get information with it. This is Richard Attenborough, of course, who's the navigator. And off camera is Hardy Kruger, who is the boy wonder who figures out how to create a new plane from the wreckage of the old one. And it's one of my favorite films. It's the greatest survival movie ever made, I think. So a couple other actors in here. We get some quick shots. He plays the doctor, and he's George Kennedy, of course, who went on to do Cool Hand Luke and Airport and many other great films. And this is Hardy Kruger, who he won an award for this film for Best Actor. I think it was the New York Film Critics Award, something like that. But he refused the award, I think because he didn't think his acting was good enough. I don't know the specifics. Anyway, he is a great actor. He was in the Hitler Youth in World War II, just at the end of the war. But he made another great film called Sunday's N.C. Bell. It's 1962, about a Vietnam veteran from the French Army, Vietnam veteran, who suffers post-traumatic stress syndrome, set in Paris. It's a great French New Wave film, and it's his personal favorite film. And I think he currently lives in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. There's a few other people in this film that are still alive. Richard Attenborough, George Kennedy, Hardy Kruger, and Ernest Borgnine, who's over 90 years old now. And here's Peter Finch, of course, who went on to get the only posthumous Oscar in history for Network. Here he plays this army officer who's a real by the book guy who's has this Sergeant Watson who rebels against him, and there's a lot of great psychological tension to this film, and it's a great survival story set in the desert. It was in the desert, or filmed in the desert of Yuma, Arizona, and which was, I think, over 100 degrees at times. But one interesting story about this, which you will not hear anywhere else. Jimmy Stewart. So Jimmy Stewart was the outsider of the film because he was an American and a lot of these actors were Europeans. He felt kind of like the outsider, and they were all, after hours carrying on with various hijinks. So, but he finally went out with them, and they got these dummies from in the first scene where the plane crashes. The dummies are supposed to be the dead bodies, so they got the dummies, went out with them in the car driving around Yuma at night. And with Jimmy Stewart, they also had these prop machine guns, so they waited for his cars to see them go by and people to see them, and then they threw the dummies out of their car windows and jumped out and used the machine guns to pretend they're shooting the dummies. And people ended up calling the police on them. But when the cops found out Jimmy Stewart was one of them, they let him go, of course. Yeah, you won't hear that story anywhere else. That was in Jimmy Stewart's biography. That's where I got it. But the other thing that is well known is that the stunt flyer Paul Mantz was crashed during this film, the making of the film. So this is Jimmy Stewart in the plane trying to see if this homemade plane they built will work. And one reason they say that Paul Mantz died in the crash is because he wasn't wearing a helmet. The reason he wasn't is because he wanted to look like this, so he was wearing a captain's helmet, when he was doing the actual flying. So he wasn't wearing a crash helmet. We got Dan Duryea, who is better known for gangster films of the 40s, and Ronald Fraser, who played Sergeant Watson, the rebellious sergeant who finally disobeyed us. And Richard Attenborough has an essential role as like the go-between between the two to get them to work together. And that's the thing about this film. It's also about teamwork, because every character plays an important, essential role in the film, psychologically and materially, and because they all built the plane together, and they all are essential components of the film. I think Ernest Borgnine's character is a little too over the top, though, as far as his being acting and saying, doesn't quite blend with the rest of the cast. But maybe, as I said, it's a European cast for the most part. But so anyway, again, one of my favorite films. And if you're watching the Academy Awards tonight, you'll see that it towers over any of the films nominated this year, 2008. So, any other films? Yeah, maybe next time I'll talk about some Richard Burton and Liz Taylor films, because they made a whole string of great ones in the 60s. He's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was Mike Nichols' first film, his first film direction. And they even did a film called Boom, which is based on a Tennessee Williams play set on a Greek island.